welcome to another episode of the Indie Author Mindset podcast with me, Adam Croft. Fair warning, first of all, I'm recording this episode first thing on a Monday morning again. Not sure whether that's a good idea, but we'll soon work that out, won't we, between us? First of all, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the Indie Author Mindset podcast. Hit the subscribe button on your podcatcher, and please do take a moment to leave us a rating. It only takes a second. You don't even have to stop listening to the podcast while you're doing it, and it really does help me out, helps us out, and your podcast program will start to help recommend this podcast to other people who are looking for things like it. So please do take a second to subscribe, to leave a rating. It would be hugely appreciated by me. I should also mention the podcast is sponsored by Ingram Spark, who will help you get your paperbacks and hardbacks into over 40,000 bookstores and libraries worldwide. You can get started today at ingramspark.com. What's new with me this week? Well, I can now officially say that my new book, What Lies Beneath, has had the most successful pre-order ever of any of my books, which is brilliant, considering it's the first book in a brand new, untested series. That's quite something. It's the first time a series book has ever beaten any of my psychological thrillers, for example. So I'm really pleased with that. It's beating it on all counts at the moment. And it's quite interesting because during the pre-order period, the only thing I actually have access to, figures-wise, and I'm able to see, are the Kindle pre-orders. Everything else is hidden from me until the book is actually out. And just on Kindle orders alone, it's beaten all of my previous books on all vendors added together. So really happy with that. But what drove that? Well, this is a bit different, this book. It's set in a real location, so that's the first time I've ever done that. I've done a bit of a different style of launch this time. Not much of it has been online. That's been fairly standard. I've done a lot of local media in the area that the book is set, up in Rutland. I've done a lot of BBC radio interviews there, other local radio stations, local newspapers, websites, things like that. So I've done quite a lot in the community in terms of media stuff and locally there, and that has really helped. It's built up quite a buzz locally, to the point where I've even this morning had emails from local bookshops who have tripled their initial order of paperbacks. So even bricks and mortar sales are really strong, and this is in the middle of a pandemic. This is when people aren't even going out. So really pleased with that. But as I say, it's not just local stuff. It's not just paperbacks and in-store purchases. It very much is still online. That's where the huge bulk of it is. And Kindle pre-orders alone, and considering I'm not particularly Amazon focused, Kindle pre-orders alone have outstripped all pre-orders of all previous books with all vendors put together. So I'm really pleased, really looking forward actually to seeing the final numbers once I know what I've got at Kobo, at Apple and all of the various other vendors, and paperbacks as well, because this is going to be a pretty paperback heavy launch, because I'm, as I say, going into a local area where perhaps people don't have Kindles, perhaps they don't have e-readers. These are people who perhaps don't read all that often as well. So going and getting a paperback from a local shop, or even ordering from Amazon, is going to be what they're looking at doing. So I've been obviously doing my paperback pre-orders through Ingram Spark, so that's all been set up and the orders have been coming in and they're ready to go out when the book comes out on the 28th of July. So I will keep you updated on how that all goes. Some news which isn't related to me. I noticed there's lots of articles floating around about audio at the moment, but Bookwire held an all about audio conference recently, and something that jumped out at me is that highlighted that the US audio market is now more than half that of the ebook market. If you think about it, that's quite astonishing, because we all know how big the ebook market is. So for the audiobook market in the US to now be more than half of that, that's extraordinary, particularly when you think that as authors we're all We focus on ebook perhaps if we're indie. We certainly want to get our paperbacks out there, but paperbacks generally are around 10% that of the ebook market. So if you're prioritising paperbacks over audiobooks, you're prioritising 10% of the ebook market over more than half of it. So you're missing out on a huge chunk of cash if you're not focusing on audio right now. And it's growing. It's the only area of the market really that's seeing that enormous level of growth. So with that in mind, and because I've had so many questions and so much focus on audio recently in the Indie Author Mindset Facebook group on Patreon and all of the emails and messages that I get, I am preparing and have been preparing for some time my new audiobooks for authors course as we speak. So make sure you're a member of the Indie Author Mindset Facebook group so you can make the most of that and find out about it when it's out. Lots of stuff in there. It's a much larger course than I usually produce. It's going to be very comprehensive. It's going to cover all areas of audio, including advertising wide, using findaway voices, how things have changed at ACX, how you pay narrators, whether you should try and do things yourself and how you can do things yourself if you want to. There's a module from a very experienced audiobook narrator on how to work with narrators, what they look for. There's all sorts of stuff, advertising, marketing, BookBub audio ads, Authors Direct, all sorts of things going in there. So it's a very comprehensive course, and I think it's going to be really, really helpful to you in getting the most out of that massively growing audiobook market. So I'll give you some more news on that once that's available. But as a reminder, you can get 50% off of any of my courses. Just head over to courses.indieauthormindset.com and enter the promo code podcast at the checkout, and you'll get 50% off of any of them, and there's no bigger discounts available anywhere else, I can promise you that. Just some of the courses off the top of my head: write killer blurbs and hooks, sell more books wide, calculating, read through, all much more than that as well. They're all very short, they're to the point, they're not fluffed out with nonsense. I just get straight into the good stuff, and the pricing reflects that as well. Pretty much all of my courses cost less than $50 even before the discount is applied, so you can get each of them for less than $25 with your podcast discount code. So come and join me and the 1,000 students who've signed up and taken my courses over the past year. Courses.indieauthormindset.com. That promo code is podcast. Now, some interesting news on indies taking the world by storm. And even if you're not in the crime sphere, you're probably going to be aware of LJ Ross, who is a crime author, British crime author, set up in the Northeast. She has done incredibly well with her books, and she's now, interestingly, the first indie published author to be shortlisted for a British Book Award. Her novel Imposter is about a forensic psychologist hunting a serial killer, and it's a contender for the Crime and Thriller Book of the Year Award. And the winner will be announced at the British Book Awards today, actually, as I record this. So by the time you hear this, she might have already won it. So go and have a look, research that, and see if that's the case. She's up against stiff competition, though. Bestsellers including Val McDermid and Lee Child are also on the shortlist. So it would be extraordinary if she could win that, and fantastic for the indie author industry as well. Now, something that you might have seen in the news, and which has certainly been extending its tendrils into our industry, is the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, which has been going on all around the world, started in the US and has now gone much wider. It showed that a third of the top 58 advertisers on Facebook will, or are likely to, suspend their Facebook ads. A third of the top 58, and a further 40% are considering doing so. So we're talking 3/4 of advertisers who are looking like they may well suspend their Facebook ads. The social network is struggling to convince advertisers it's doing enough to fight hate speech on its platform. I'm not particularly active on social media. I obviously hang around in the Indie Author Mindset Facebook group. I'm not somebody who browses the news feed. I certainly don't dive into the comments. The majority of my posts that go up are done by my wonderful assistants. And apart from in the Indie Author Mindset Facebook group, of course, they're all me. Mainly because social media can be a horrible, horrible place. There are Facebook groups that I've left over the years because of some people's bullying attitudes and styles and just a general pervasive negative feeling around the place. So I'm completely on board with this. And rather than the campaign petering out as was expected, it's growing. It's going worldwide, and Mark Zuckerberg has already said he doesn't care, and that advertisers will be back. Is he right? Time will tell. What should you do as an indie author? I mean, ideologically speaking, it sounds simple. We should stop giving them our advertising dollars while they're peddling hate speech and actively dividing communities. But of course, it's not that simple, is it? It's really difficult for small businesses and for authors who rely on those sorts of ads to build their business. And of course, with so many big advertisers dropping out, it has got to be said that the cost of ads is coming down, and it will continue to come down as a result. So does that mean authors could massively cut back on their spending without actually losing out on the same levels of profit? Yes. If click costs end up halving, for example, just to pick a random amount out of my head, if the costs halve, you could conceivably halve your spend and keep the same level of sales. That way, Facebook get hit, Mark Zuckerberg's pocket gets hit, and your business and your book sales don't. Worth thinking about, worth keeping an eye on. I have cut my Facebook spend back, not just because of this campaign, because of a number of things recently, and what I'm using very, very sparingly and for very specific purposes. I'm doing lots of local targeting, for example, with my new book, which I mentioned, in the Rutland area, targeting local people. That's working very well. I'm doing some other very specific things to build up my new launch and reach my existing audience, but the spend is nowhere near what it was a month or two ago. And sales haven't been hit. I've been working a lot on building my Amazon sales as well through AMS and Amazon ads. So I'm increasing what I'm doing there because I don't really do anything to push Amazon sales at all. My Amazon spend is, well, I say fairly low. I mean, in comparison to what I spend elsewhere, I think last month AMS was about £4,500 or £5,000 last month, so that is fairly low compared to what I spend on some other platforms. And I wondered if there might be a bit more juice I could squeeze there. I've been seeing some promising results. I've seen no dip in profits since I've shuffled my ad spend around a bit. So don't be afraid to have a play and see what works for you. There are no golden rules, or very few golden rules when it comes to advertising. You might be surprised what actually works. And this is a good time to do it. The world is in flux. The industry is in flux. You might find something that works for you. It's also quite difficult for me because I'm in a launch period. It's a big book. It's a big series. It needs to land with a bang. So I've got to be very careful with what I do. But of course, I'm very, very much behind the Stop Hate for Profit campaign. So I'm wondering what you're doing. Let me know if this is something that's affecting you. If you're struggling perhaps to know where to put your advertising dollars, perhaps you want to pull some away from Facebook, but you're worried about the you're worried about the sales dropping. Let me know what you're doing and how that's affecting you. Very interested to hear from that. Hear from you on that even. You can tell it's a Monday morning, can't you? I saw an article this week from Jane Friedman. She was talking about marathons, sprints and pounces as a 3-tiered approach to book launches, and I think to your marketing career, to your author career in general. Essentially, the long-term strategy is marathons. So that's the prolonged investment of energy, time, and, yes, probably money, in anticipation of a long-term payoff. And this is what the indie author mindset's all about, mainly because this is the area which is most often neglected or misunderstood. Everybody wants their short-term gains, but often at the expense of long-term success. She talks about sprints as well, launch-specific or short-term activities, promotional ideas, not instant things, but over a far shorter period of time than marathons. And also pounces, which are instant things you pounce on when you see them. So it might be a quick interview, a short quote for an article, a media appearance, something which doesn't need much time or energy and which won't necessarily have a huge payoff, but which requires an immediate and spontaneous yes or no. It's all really interesting stuff about strategy, general career organisation, and well worth a read. I'll pop the link in the show notes to that article, if I remember. Hello to everybody recently who's joined the Indie Author Mindset Facebook group as well. We've had a bit of a bounce in the new audience in the group and also on the podcast, people who have discovered me from various media things I've done recently. So hello to all of you. I have, because we did start to get a little bit off track and off topic in the group, I have posted a sticky announcement at the top of the group which explains in a little more detail what the Indie Author Mindset is all about. Because it's not just another indie publishing or self-publishing group. It does have a specific focus. It is all about a specific strategy. There are things that we don't cover and that we don't talk about and that we don't go into because we do have quite a tight focus on how things should be done. And that is the focus of the group. There are lots of other groups for lots of other topics, and I can heartily recommend a number of them, but we do need to try and keep things on track. So I've posted in the group there to let everybody know what we're about, what we do, and how that can benefit your career. So I would strongly recommend looking at that. I've got so much more I could go through, but I'm aware that I am running well beyond my anticipated 15-minute run length, and I still got to say hello to our new patrons. Hello to Isabel Kate, to Roxandra Tarker, Gareth Stevens and Anne Cameron, who have all become Indie Author Mindset patrons recently. If you've enjoyed the podcast, if you get value from the Indie Author Mindset community, please do consider joining Isabel, Roxandra, Gareth and Anne and all of the other patrons of mine in the Indie Author Mindset Patreon program. If you join today as a supporter, you'll get a personalised thank you on the podcast, a free Indie Author Mindset book of your choice, access to exclusive articles that get posted in the group once or twice a week there, hints, tips and strategies, exclusive access to live Q&A events, priority one-on-one help and coaching from me via the Patreon messaging system. You can drop me a message anytime and I'll get back to you very, very quickly and help you one-on-one with anything you need that help with. You get a free Indie Author Mindset course, a copy of every book as it's released, and much, much more as well. And that's all from just $2. And you've got, well, a lot of value in there. Put it this way, my time on the one-on-one coaching and helping costs hundreds of times more than that. So you're getting a really good deal there. And of course, your support. That helps keep the podcast and the Indie Author Mindset project running and empowering indie authors. So head over to patreon.com/Indie Author Mindset or check out the link in the show notes for that. I am done. Stick a fork in me. I'll be back next week. Take care. This episode of the Indie Author Mindset podcast was presented by me, Adam Croft. The Indie Author Mindset podcast is sponsored by Ingram Spark, helping you get your book into over 40,000 bookstores and libraries worldwide. Get started today at ingramspark.com. The theme music for this podcast is by the Caesareans. Don't forget you can claim 50% off any Indie Author Mindset course by entering the promo code podcast at the checkout. Links are in the show notes. For more great tips and guidance, join the Indie Author Mindset group on Facebook.